Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Shaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye Nasta Praeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtaki. Good morning to everyone and welcome to Bhakti Center Srimad Bhagavatam class. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam 9th Canto, Chapter 18 and text number 51. This is the last text in the chapter. Let's see who else is here. Good morning, Osea, Lori, Prati. Good morning to all of you. So I will read the Sanskrit of the text. This chapter is called King Yayati Regains His Youth. Very wild story in this chapter, actually. Evam, should we do this responsively? Ananda Bihari, or I just chanted? I guess I just chanted this over Zoom, trying to figure this out.
Yeah, no response.
No response, okay. Evam Varsha Sahasrani Manakshastar Manak Sukam Vitadano Pinatripyat Sarva Bhaumo Kadindriyaha. Are you able to put the verse on the screen? I'm not sure if you're able to do that. Let me chant it 2 more times. Evam Varsha Sahasrani Manakshastar Manaksukam Vedadano Pinatripyat Sarva Bhaumo Kadindriyai. One more time. Evam Varsha Sahasrani Manakshastar Manaksukam Vitadhano Pinatripyat Sarvabhauma Kadindriyai. Reading the word for word synonyms. Evam, in this way, Varsha Sahasrani, for 1,000 years, Manakshastai, by the mind and 5 knowledge-acquiring senses. Manaksukam, temporary happiness created by the mind. Vidadhana, executing. Api, although. Na atripyat, could not be satisfied. Sarva Bhaumao, although he was the king of the entire world. Get that, he could not be satisfied although he was the king of the entire world. Kat indriyai, because of possessing impure senses. Translation. Although Maharaj Yayati was the king of the entire world, and he engaged his mind and 5 senses in enjoying material possessions for 1,000 years, he was unable to be satisfied. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. The Kad Indriya, or how's my sound? Can you all hear me? Should I use this?
We can hear you okay.
Purified senses can be purified if one engages the senses and the mind in Krishna consciousness. Sarvopadi vinir muktam tat paratvena nirmalam. One must be freed from all designations. When one identifies himself with the material world, his senses are impure. But when one achieves spiritual realization and identifies himself as the servant of the Lord, his senses are purified immediately. Engagement with the purified senses in the service of the Lord is called bhakti. Let me read that again, that's so powerful. Engagement of the purified senses in the service of the Lord is called bhakti. Hrishikesha Hrishikena Sevanam Bhakti Uchate. One may enjoy the senses for many thousands of years, but unless one purifies the senses, one cannot be happy. Om Ajnanatinarandasya Satyananjana Salakaya Chaksun Milatam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manodistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Sapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Samyavari Paschatya Deshatarine Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangolam Gayate Girim Yatkripas Bande Shri Gurundinataranam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanham Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you all for joining this Bhakti Center Srimad Bhagavatam class today. Yes. So here we are. Those are prayers of invocation, prayers for blessings, prayers to understand, prayers to receive, and prayers to give. So let's see. In this purport of Srimad Bhagavatam, just looking to see who's joined. Oh, quite a lot of people. Sarah's here. Shamala Priya, Pat. Welcome to all of you. In this purport, Srila Prabhupada is quoting one of the most often quoted verses from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. The verse number is 112. The verse is Sarvopadi Vinir Muktam Tat Paratvena Nirmalam Hrishikena Hrishikesha Sevanam Bhaktir Uchate. So this verse is speaking about how, well, let me just translate it. The verse in translation is, Bhakti means engaging all our senses in the service of the Lord, the supreme master of all the senses. When the spirit soul renders service to the Supreme, there are two side effects. One is freed from all material designations, and simply by being employed in the service of the Lord, one's senses are purified. So two effects of bhakti. One is that we become free from all designations, and the other is that our senses are purified. Ananda Bihari Prabhu, is it possible that you could remove that Bhakti Center logo and I could see the faces of some of the wonderful people I'm speaking to? Is that possible or impossible? I don't want to ask you for anything impossible, but it would be more of a personal exchange for me if you could remove that logo.
Yeah, I'll try to play with it. Okay,
thank you so much, because I'd like to be able to see your faces and see if what I'm saying is registering with all of you. So yeah, two effects of bhakti, that's very important, right? And Srila Prabhupada says here, but, when someone identifies with the material world or the material body, our senses are impure. But when we, through spiritual realization, when we can begin to identify ourselves as a servant of the Lord, it's like changing the account, right? Like you have to change the account. You're going to change electric companies, or you're going to change something like that. You're going to change your water company. So you have to change the account and identify yourself as a servant of the Lord. In that way, our senses become purified. And then those designations of man or woman or American or this or that, they begin to melt away by this spiritual identification, re-identification. So Srila Prabhupada makes the point in the final concluding sentence at the end of this purport. He says, kind of really summing up the whole chapter, he says, one may enjoy the senses for many thousands of years. And remember, it said that he was the king of the whole world, but still he couldn't satisfy his senses, right? So unless one purifies the senses, one cannot be happy, even if they're the king of the whole wide world. Yeah, right. We have the kind of king of the castle mentality, right? Or queen of the castle mentality. But so this kind of material identification is, Srila Prabhupada calls it a hope against hope, which is a really interesting phrase. So with that material identification, we're cherishing in our hearts a kind of a hope against hope, that even though I've failed so many times at satisfying my material desires, for sure, this time things are going to be different, right? For sure, this time things are going to be different. And this is called, there's a Sanskrit term for this kind of thinking. It's called durashaya. So just like a Mahatma or a great devotee takes shelter of the divine energy, this durashaya is a taking shelter of the material energies, which is a false or a temporary shelter, trying to find shelter in something temporary or flimsy. So I want to ask you all a question. Have you ever seen one of those pictures in the news when there's been a, like a terrible, devastating tornado or hurricane somewhere? And they show a kind of a very heart-rending, poignant kind of a photo of a little child. Sometimes it's a lady all alone, but in particular, a little child standing outside this devastation of her former home. And she's standing there clutching a broken doll or a teddy bear with one of his eyes ripped off. And she's just holding this little doll or teddy as her only memory of a past security or reality. Have you seen a picture like that? So it's interesting to think about that, because in fact, we are like that. We are like that. We see all around us that things of this world, even the relationships of this world, are fleeting. And yet we cling on to them like a little child with a security blanket. It's a false shelter, a durashaya, a hope against all hope, that this one thing or these many things will give me shelter, will give me security, will give me refuge. Something in the chat, let me just see. Those, okay. It's okay if you have your videos off, I understand. Okay.
Rukmini, Devi, Prabhu,
Yeah.
on your screen, top right corner, tap on something that says view.
Okay.
And check the gallery. Then this way you'll see the faces of the people.
Show grid video. Show grid video.
Yeah, grid. Yeah.
Okay. Now I can
Do you
see more
see-
of you.
Okay,
Yes.
cool.
Good morning, Andrea. Good morning, Sarah. Good morning, Lori. Good morning, Isabel. Good. Okay. So yeah, we're trying to hang on to this security or false refuge, false shelter. So there's one teacher who said that in this world we all exist, and I love this, that we all exist with a God-sized hole in our hearts, and we're just continually trying to fill up that hole with the pleasures of this world, with food or sex or money or prestige or power, or we're trying to control other people or things using our best intelligence or our beauty or our influence. So this is this consciousness of durashaya, a false shelter. Once Srila Prabhupada was walking in Sydney, Australia, and he was walking past a children's playground, and in the distance was the city center with all the tall skyscraper buildings. And Srila Prabhupada gestured toward the children's play yard and then toward the downtown in the distance. And he said, children's playground, adults' playground. So the point here is that both are a durashaya, or false shelter, for those of us who are like children, really. absorbed in playing around in this temporary world. We're playing around, right? We're not feeling the urgency. We're not seeing or sensing the urgency. Otherwise, even though I've lost so many people, I've lost this, I've lost that, but we don't see that this body of mine is also temporary. And some people say, well, this is morbid. Don't talk about this. Don't think about this. You're just being pessimistic and morbid. But Srila Prabhupada's view of this is very, very beautiful, I think, because there is a sort of a material pessimism in Krishna consciousness, but a great spiritual optimism that, yes, I have the opportunity to go play with Krishna eternally in whatever relationship I choose. Yeah, so that's a beautiful spiritual optimism as opposed to a false optimism of this world. So this is I would say this is really straight talk from Srila Prabhupada. And we may not like to hear it. And we might think, wow, Prabhupada, can't you just cut us a little slack here? Isn't there any happiness in this material world? I mean, really, it's a little too much, right? So I'll tell you another story. Once Srila Prabhupada was in New Vrindavan, and he was sitting on the grass under a tree with a group of devotees and friends and guests. And on the grass, right in front of him, there were a couple of baby kittens, and they were playing and wrestling around and rolling around and biting each other very playfully. And Srila Prabhupada said, you see, there is happiness in this material world. And everyone was so shocked because this is the opposite of what he usually always says. But then he continued in a very wise way. He said, he started to explain that while there is some happiness here, it's not sufficient to fill up our thirsty, famished hearts. Just like in a desert, a few drops of water are just not enough to quench that famished thirst. So in his purport to the very first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada discusses the Adi Ras, which means the original taste, the original relationship with Krishna, the supreme soul of our souls, and the original most beloved person, friend, true enjoyer, and controller of everything, right? This is Krishna. And this Adi Rasa, this is what we're meant to be tasting. But because we've got this durashaya, we keep trying to taste these temporary things that just don't fill us up, just don't fill up that God-sized hole in our hearts. We're seeking the taste of that relationship, but we're seeking it in so many reflections of that relationship. And you've heard the term Srila Prabhupada uses, in perverted reflections. So we're looking for that reality in the shadow of our relationship with our true beloved person. Imagine if you're going to have breakfast this morning and you sit down to have your granola or your oatmeal or whatever. And instead of having your bananas and blueberries and oatmeal or granola, you just start to try to eat the shadow of the oatmeal or the granola. Will that satisfy you? No, the shadow will never satisfy us. Only the true reality of that relationship with our true beloved original lover or friend or child or master will satisfy us. So these are a few thoughts on this verse and this part of this chapter. But because this is the last verse of the chapter, and it was really a wild and crazy chapter here, I wanted to give some thoughts on earlier points that came up in the chapter as well. So we've all heard the aphorism, pride cometh before a fall. I think this is from the Puritans. And so here in this chapter, we see this interesting character, Devayani. And she's the daughter of a big, great Brahmin teacher. And she's fallen, right? Pride cometh before a fall. So she's fallen. She's actually been pushed down a well, right? She's fallen. She's been pushed down a well. And she was the proud daughter of this learned Brahmin. And Sarmista, who was the one who pushed her, she was also very proud. She was the proud daughter of a royal king. So they were both very proud. And their pride was their fall down and their degradation. And the degradation of the whole Varnashram system, or what's come to be known as the caste system by birth in India. So this kind of pride, discrimination against others, lack of mercy and compassion for those people of a, so-called lower social status. All of this has been the degradation of the whole system. And it all starts with pride. And in the Manasiksha of Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, he begins these instructions to the mind by saying, the first step that we need to take on the path of bhakti is that we need to give up pride. We need to give up this illusion that because of my position, or because of my body, or my beauty, or my intelligence, or my knowledge, or my this or my that, my position in society, my intellectual educational status, my string of degrees in the world, all of these things tend to give us pride. And Kunti Devi also talks about this in her beautiful prayers. Janmaitwarya Shuta Shribir Edamana Madakuman Naivarhatya Bidatim Tumbai Tamakinshan Nagocharam. So Kunti Devi, she talks about these things as though they are intoxicants, which I find really interesting because, in fact, we're all intoxicated with these things that give us pride in this world. Beauty, high birth, education, influence. We're all like kind of stoned actually on these things. But the authentic, so there's something called the authentic Devi Varnashram, which is the divine way of organizing society that honors every contribution of every member of society. And Srila Prabhupada describes this, you'll be surprised, as a sort of a spiritual communism, believe it or not. It's a spiritual communism. What's the motto of the Communist Manifesto? From each according to their means, to each according to their needs. This is the manifesto of communism. But so what would spiritual communism look like? Spiritual communism means that instead of having the state in the center, the fallible, corruptible state, that God or Krishna would be in the center of all of our lives, right? And this is spiritual communism. So I wanted to bring out this point because these days some devotees are saying that we have to establish Varna ashram. But if we try to do that, well, this kind of pride is prominent in our hearts, then that institution of Varnashram will, just as it has in the past, will once again prove to be a disaster, as we've seen in India in the past few centuries. So much discrimination, so much pride, so much pushing the unfortunates down. Yeah. So these are a few thoughts that I wanted to share with you, and I'm looking forward to your thoughts. What was important for you here? What's a takeaway for you? If you want to reflect something back, or if you have any questions, let's discuss this a little bit. Thank you so much.
Rukmini,
Thank you all.
Devi, Prabhu.
Thank you.
I just wanted to reflect quickly that I am stoned on pride and lust for material stuff. I really like that one. Stoned on those things. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a very vivid analogy.
And if we're so stoned, we can go down to the animal form of life. Like just imagine a horse or a cow who stands in a field all day long. Could you do that? Could you just stand there? That's because their intelligence is reduced. They can stand there just chewing their cud, chewing grass all day long, looking at the sky, looking at the tree. We can't do that because we have a developed intelligence. So if we want to be stoned in the material world, we can allow our intelligence to be reduced and go down to these animal forms of life. Some people say, no, it's not possible to go down after being in the human form. Yes, it is, depending on our Like at the beginning, Ananda Bihari Prabhu, before you were all joined, I asked Ananda Bihari Prabhu, how are you today? And he said, I'm happy by choice. Beautiful. So we can make the choice of how we want to live our lives. Do we want to be stoned? Or do we want to be happy in Krishna consciousness with divine happiness? So sorry. Okay, please share your thoughts or your reflections or your questions. Thank you all.
Hare Krishna, Rukmini.
Hare Krishna, Jamuna Jaya. So happy to
So
see you
nice
smile.
to see you.
Happy by choice. Happy by choice.
Thank you for this wonderful class. I was just reflecting how the expression false shelter is just a perfect one for this week as we look to Govardhan Puja, where the model of the people of Vrindavan, they took the right shelter and their consciousness was the right one to, when in distress, where to go. And so it's just nice to start up this week that will end with Govardhan Puja with these words. This is the false, but the residents from Vrindavan show us what the real shelter is. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And you know, we think, well, they must have been really squashed under there, but they weren't. They were so happy. And you know, they didn't experience any hunger or any suffering, and they were just all with Krishna together, which usually never happened, because usually when he'd be out in the field with his boyfriends, the gopis would be crying, or if he's with the gopis, the cowherd boys are at home in their beds crying. But under Govardhan Hill, they're all happy under this beautiful, true refuge and shelter. So let's seek that. Yeah, let's aim our glance right at that pole star of happiness and shelter. Thank you so much. Beautiful. I just don't know if you're happy by nurture, by nature, or by choice.
You know, there's a song we used to sing in church when I was little. This joy that I had, the world didn't give it to me. The world didn't give it, the world can't take it away.
Wow, never heard
Right?
that
And
before.
so it's Krishna's joy, it's Krishna's happiness. So
Yeah, it's your choice to take shelter of him. Thank you so much for your beautiful association and friendship and example. Thank you so much. Haribo. Haribo. What else? Please
Good
reflect
morning.
something.
Good morning, dear sister.
Good morning, my dear
been-
sister.
I've been following the Bhagavatam text for days now, trying to wrap my material mind over these two women who one pushed the other down the well, and they were fighting. And thank you for just speaking about pride, because I have not been able to grasp like what is going on. And
Right.
I totally get it now. Thank you.
Yeah, it's all about pride. So it's not about, it's not about what body we're in. We may be women, may be men. You know, there's another saying, even the pauper is proud of his penny. So we may be homeless, we may be a pauper, but we may still have pride within our hearts. No, don't take my ripped blanket. That's my ripped blanket, whatever. But so it's that pride that needs to be weeded out of the hearts. So that's what's I think that's what's very important in this chapter. Even if we're the king of the whole world, still, if we have that pride, we'll never be happy. And looking for that false shelter. Thank you, Susan. What else?
Hare Krishna, Rukmini Prabhu, it's Andrea.
Hare Krishna, dear Andrea.
Hare Krishna. So what my takeaway from this, first off, I always love that when you give us Prabhupada being very forthright, you always manage to give the argument that's going on in my head and be like, well, you must be saying, like, come on, Prabhupada, there must be something. Always what my brain is saying, and it's hilarious. So I love where you said there is happiness in the material world, but it's not enough to quench our thirsty hearts. And I feel like that's so important for me to acknowledge that there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that there is happiness in the material world. So it doesn't have to be a but, it doesn't have to be, there is happiness in the material world, but we should be going towards, no, it could be an and, it could be, there is happiness in the material world, and the spiritual happiness is what's eternal and what we're looking for. So just
That's really
existing with those in
Thank
that
you.
way. Because sometimes when I put things with a but, then it feels like it's taking away from the other, and then I don't feel complete with it. So thank you so much for always kind of bringing it into that context, so that it's like, yes, that's okay. But then also,
Yeah.
and I did it again. And I want to look to the spiritual world.
Thank you. That's very beautiful. Thank you for that of And, you know, that means that we can really, truly honor the people that are in our lives, and really realizing the temporality of it all really makes us cherish them more and not take them for granted. I know, you know, I have a very loving husband, and sometimes he'll say to me, you know, one day one of us is going to be gone, but I don't know if it's going to be you first or me first, but I just want you to know that I really love you. And, you know, so that's a beautiful thing, to send those little messages of appreciation to the people in our lives, and honor those relationships, because, you know, yes, even though this is temporary, it's and that's actually the difference between our Vaishnavacharyas and the impersonalists, that, like, the Vaishnavacharyas don't say that this world is false. Actually, they say it's temporary. So it's temporary, but it's still Krishna's energy. So yeah, let's honor the people in our lives. Thank you for that beautiful wisdom. Thank you. Yes. What else? Looks like Isabel wants to say something, but I'm just not sure. She has that pregnant look in her eyes.
Krishna, Rukmini Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Isabel.
I was just, the example you gave about your husband, and my husband's here, so I just told him.
That's
Told him
really
I loved
beautiful.
him, and I don't know who's going to go first. He's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. And, you know, with children also, you know, what do people really want? People really want appreciation. Like, they've researched this in big companies. Do the employees want higher pay? Do they want a swimming pool? Do they want childcare? Do they want, you know, a condo in the this or that? They want appreciation. So people want to be seen and heard and appreciated. So, you know, maybe sometimes people stick their kids in front of the TV or buy them expensive computer toys, but what they really want is their parents' attention. What we all really want is to be seen, to be heard, to be loved for who we really are, right? Not some shadow, not some game of relationship, but we want authentic relationships. So thank you. And sorry.
That is so true. Thank you.
Yeah. And I was thinking, even though those relationships are temporary, if they function in an authentic way on the path of bhakti, appreciating people as part of Krishna. I love you for yourself, but also you're part of Krishna. So I honor you. Then those relationships can take on that eternal, authentic quality. And I think that's very important. What else? I want to hear from all of you. Who else has something to share? I see Akiko is making chapati.
I was just going to say, with the appreciation, it's like, I appreciate you're doing this class today. And I'm mesmerized watching Akiko, that the service that she's doing right now. And it's just like, it's just touching my heart to just to see that, to just washing plates. And so thank you, Akiko.
Thank you. She's acting in bhakti love, right? She's appreciating. She just met her husband in the kitchen, and they just appreciated each other. So yeah, let's appreciate the gifts that we have, and whatever we have, let's appreciate and honor those relationships and those people. But yeah, not but, and. Thank you. Genevieve Harrison can't speak out loud, as there will be feedback because the class is playing on the speakers here. Thank you, dearest Rukmini Devi, for this beautiful class. The point about pride being manifest in all kinds of circumstances is something I feel so much. Once I was bowing down in Radhakund and no one was around, and I bowed down into some monkey stool and human spit. I thought for a moment, I'm so humble. Thank you, Genevieve. Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, so that pride, even if we're bowing down at Radhakund or doing Dandavata obeisances, looking a pig in the eye, you know, we that pride could still be there. So yes, and someone said that the real reason we do bow down is so that we can get the dust of the feet of all the devotees on our heads. So that's a really, really beautiful thing while bowing down. Because in so many places, in so many songs, our acharyas are talking about how the dust of the feet of the devotees are my 5 kinds of food, or I live just eating the dust and drinking the water from the feet of the devotees. So we kind of never really do that. But when we think of bowing down and putting the dust of their feet on our head, what to speak of a monkey or a pig at Radhakund, yeah, teaching us how really tiny we are. What a great lesson. Thank you, Janavi. That was super beautiful. Yeah. So even when we think we're doing I'm doing the process, I'm bowing down here, but then there's always that chance that little shadow, that kind of monkey mind, monkey. So she ran across a monkey, but then there's that monkey inside our own minds, right? What else? Who would like to share something? Some thought or some reflection or some question, or what was important for you? What was important for you here? Karuna Shakti to everyone. Hare Krishna. Thank you for the class. What is the difference between Vedic Varnashram and Daivi Varnashram? Well, you know, Vedic is a tricky word because it's used in different ways. Daivi Varnashram is the divine understanding. And some people might have an understanding that this is by birth. So some people who believe that they're following the Vedas would completely discredit any of our chance to have access to the path of bhakti. You're not born in this tradition. You're not born in a Brahmin family. You can't read the Vedas. So, women are not eligible. Even men who are born in countries outside of the Indian culture don't have eligibility. So yeah, it's not by birth. It's by heart connection, and it's by following the process. And Srila Prabhupada battled against this during his whole time. 2 verses that were very key to his teachings. One of them actually states so many people from so many different cultures of the world. Kirata Hunandra Pulinda Pulkasa Abira Shimba Yavana Kashadaya Yanyesha Papa Yadupashraya Shraya Sudanti Tasmai Prabhu Vishnave Namaha. So this verse actually states the names of the Greeks, the Turks, the Mongolians, these people. And the verse says, all of them have access by the power of the great Vishnu and his devotees. So anyone who says that women don't have access, well, my dear friend, you don't have access either if you're not born in a Brahmin family, according to these Varnashram by birth people. No, this is not what Srila Prabhupada taught. Another key verse that was very important to the Goswamis and to Srila Prabhupada was the verse that talks about, did you ever study this alchemy that in Europe, these kind of mystic scientists used to, they were researching how to make gold by an alchemical process. So Sanatana Goswami references this, and he says, just as gold can be created by an alchemical process by combining mercury with base metals, so in the same way, ordinary people like us can all become Vaishnavas, can all become devotees of the Lord by this magical alchemical process of bhakti. So this is what's important. It's not by birth. It's by change of heart. And do I have time? Does anyone else have a thought? Because I'd like to share a very nice little story I've been sharing these days. Okay, I'm going to share this story. Once there was a little boy, and he came to a great Brahmin teacher, and he said, I would like to become your student. This is an ancient story. This is not made up by Lord Chaitanya or the recent Bhakti Renaissance people or since then. This is an ancient story. So the teacher said, well, who is your father? And the boy said, I don't know who my father is. I have to go ask my mother. So he ran back to his village to ask his mother who his father was. And she said, well, I don't really know. I've had so many men I don't really know who your father is. So what does that mean? It means his mother was probably maybe a prostitute, or maybe she was some kind of a housemaid, and she'd had many men and she didn't know who his father was. So he was so simple. He ran back to the great Brahmin teacher and he said, I asked my mother and she said she doesn't know who my father is. And the great Brahmin teacher said, I will accept you as my student because you are simple and you are honest. You have the eligibility. You can become a pure devotee on the path of bhakti because you are simple and you are honest. Whereas someone else who maybe is born in a high caste family, maybe has no eligibility because of the pride in their hearts. So this pride needs to be given up. So yes, any thoughts on this story? I love this story. Or any thoughts on anything? Any other thoughts anyone else would like to share?
Rukmini Prabhu, there's a question in the chat.
Okay.
About the difference between the two ashrams.
Yes, I think I responded to that. That this word Vedic is tricky because some people take it as Vedic to be by birth, but the real correct term is Devi Varnashram, which means the divine way of dividing society. And even that is, Lord Chaitanya said, this is external. But society is, we can say, is naturally divided in all parts of the world because people naturally gravitate to the things that are of their nature. Some people are intellectuals or teachers. Some people have an administrative kind of a brain thinking. Some people like to do business or like to do farming, and then some people just like to help other people and do their work. Let me see what this says. Hare Krishna, Mataji Dandavat Pranam. Thank you for such an enlightening class and reminding us of Srila Prabhupada's beautiful examples and the fact that everything is temporary, but we still don't want to expect that we are busy in our daily chores instead of devoting ourselves. Oops, there's something down below that, let's see, the recording is on. I think I might be missing a question, but if anyone sees that. Yes, so the main point is this is not by birth. Someone may be born in a high caste family, and Prabhupada would call them, or our acharyas call them, a Brahma Bandhu, which means a friend of a Brahmin, not really a Brahmin. But when someone has the qualifications of a Brahmin, no matter what their family is, no matter what their gender is, no matter where they come from, Indradumna Swami, he has one disciple, she's a devotee, and she's from a family of cannibals. She's from the South Pacific somewhere, and her grandmother actually ate humans. Can you believe it? But she is a devotee of the Lord because of her consciousness, not because of her birth. So this is the authentic, intrinsic, and urgent teachings of Srila Prabhupada. And we have to be very careful to call out other misinterpretations, which we hear so frequently, actually. Women have no access. Outsiders have no access. Sometimes the people are using the same arguments that have been used, sometimes some men are using the same arguments that have been used against them. They use those arguments against women, that women have no access. Well, you have no access according to that argument either if you're born in a so-called Mlecha Yavana, which means Turkish people or, outsiders. Yeah. So this is very, very important. It's a very important discussion. And again, Lord Chaitanya called these designations of society, he called it external. And he told Raman, he didn't reject it, but he told Ramananda Roy, he said, go further. This is external, go further. So yeah. Any other thoughts before we bid adieu? I'm so grateful to all of you for being here. I'm so happy to see my dear friend Osea. I haven't seen you in a long time. It's so good to see you. Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you for class, Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you for the opportunity to share some thoughts with all of you. And I hope you have a very blessed week of taking shelter of the true shelter of the Govardhan Hill. And thank you. See you next time. Very good.
Thank you, Rukmini Devi Prabhu. Please come
Thank
again
you.
next time.
Thank you.
It was
Thank you for the
wonderful, very
invitation.
interactive, engaging. Thank you very much. First class. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
Thanks
for your
everyone for
beautiful
tuning
heart. Thank you for being happy by choice and teaching us.
I took that from Radhanath Swami, from our beloved Radhanath Swami. That's his line.
Really beautiful.
Mm.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you to
Hare
all of you.
Krishna.
Thanks for